Hi, Dr. Lynch, are you ready?
You know what?
Alright.
I am good, I'm good. Thank you. That's great.
It's good to see everybody. So nice to see all your faces here. I would like to call to order the collaboration for early childhood meeting on February 26th, 2025 at 6:17 p.m. in the boardroom of OPRF High School. Lisa, if you could please call the roll.
Yep, and I have to yell because I don't have a mic, so. Dr. Johnson.
Here.
Dr. Livingston.
Here.
Dr. Moharad.
Here.
Dr. Shaw.
Here.
Ms. Ross Driven.
Here.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Ms. Gaiman.
Here.
We also have Ms. Burns from District 97.
Here.
And we also have Ms. Ebony Lofton from District 97. Ms. Reynolds
Here.
and Ms. Crawford from
Here.
Collaboration.
Yes.
All right.
All right, moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments?
None for tonight.
Then we'll move on to the approval of minutes. I move to approve the November 30th, 2023, October 23rd, 2024, and December 4th, 2024 collaboration for early childhood meeting minutes as presented. Are there any corrections or adjustments that need to be made?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved.
Yes.
All right, moving on to financial reports. We'll go to the collaboration for early childhood quarterly financials.
Yes, and so I am standing in for our finance office today, so everyone has the February, oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. So I am standing in for our finance office today, so everyone has the financial report for early education services dated February 26th. I'm happy to read it. I think we usually do that. If that's important to read it into the record, I can do that.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the administrative reserve account, the balance of the collaboration for early childhood administrative reserve account is $336,853,038. Oh, this is going to be a little fast. As of February 21, 2025, the interest paid from October 2024 to January 2025 is $3,384.04. The collaboration requested funds for the third and fourth payments for the fiscal year 24-25 from the individual accounts in the following amounts. One payment was processed for a total amount of $219,270. And listed below are the breakout amounts for DN7, P200, and the Village Park. The bank balances as of 2/21/25 are District 97, $67,576.56. District 200, $52,614.75, and the Village of Oak Park, $57,973.65. Note that the administrative district will send an invoice to all three parties by May 20th, requesting payment of the July 1 contributions per the payment schedule set forth in section 4.2 of the IGA. There are no unreported subsequent events.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Let's move on to collaboration for early childhood preliminary budget for FY 2026.
Great, thank you, everyone. In your packet, you have our quarterly financial statements that were approved by the Collaboration's Board of Directors at their most recent meeting, which puts us at halfway through our fiscal year, which goes from July to June. We provide these to the IGA board so that you know that the collaboration is in a healthy financial position in general. Because in addition to our IGA contract with you all, we do receive private grants, individual fundraising, and sponsorships for events, program registrations, et cetera, that are outside of our contract. So we do have roughly 7 months of cash on hand right now, which is just comfortably within our policies. And our spending is very much in line with what our budget is. Our board, at their meeting earlier this month, our board did revise our budget for the current fiscal year, and that leads into our preliminary budget for next fiscal year. So the IGA contract requires that we present to this board our preliminary budget at this time of year. So that's why we do have this in your packet here, and it's not for approval, it's just for knowing kind of what the activities are that we're looking at for the year to come. I think at this point, the biggest variable for the organization is grants. We just, we're applying for grants all the time, some of them haven't come out yet, so many of the ones that we have in for submission, we'll know about in the next few months. So those will settle out by the time we do our final budget, which is brought to our board at our annual meeting in May. And you all will be invited to attend that annual meeting in May if you would like to, you're welcome to. It's a fun time and I highly recommend it. See, these vouching boards. So, yeah, the annual meeting to apply for that is a look back on the current year and then a more concrete look at what's to come in the next year. So the highlights for the preliminary budget for next year are really that it's status quo for the IGA work. The contract has us at the same funding level, so there's no change there. That has been the same since 2017. Our individual contributions, we expect those actually to go down a little bit, and that's because this year was an anomaly. We were fortunate enough to receive funds from Lemonade, which is just a one-time event that happens in River Forest, and that brought us in, this year, it brought us in $30,000. So that was just a lovely one-time event, but of course we budgeted that down, so that's why that change is there. Otherwise, our two largest contracts are with Easter Seals for home visiting services, and then with North. It says on here Chapin Hall, apologies, we changed from Chapin Hall to North as our data provider because that team moved from Chapin Hall to North. Which I think many of you know. So we work with those two agencies in April, because that's when they really know what their costs are going to be for next year. We always try to budget for staff increases in line with cost of living adjustments as much as possible. The budget allows it for both staff at Easter Seals and at the collaboration. Other than that, the information in your budget is specific to our grant with the village called ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. That's independent of the meeting today, so I'm not going to go into any detail there. But we're happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions?
It sounds like this is not gonna be an issue imminently, but I am seeing in the arts community and so on, organizations are canceling DEI related things, because of, I just saw a major exhibition, featuring Black and LGBT artists that was canceled as a directive. So are you anticipating that any of the grants you're applying for or anything else is something that is a concern right now? In this current climate?
I'll let Mary take
Okay, so everything is a concern. So thank you for that question. Our board had a pretty robust conversation and planning around this at our February meeting. And a lot of the takeaway for me from that is don't pre-comply with directives that aren't clear and may not be legally enforceable. For us, our equity work, our commitment to diversity, our commitment to inclusion, our commitment to communities where children and families of all types belong and can thrive is unwavering. If there's a specific, clear directive that we are mandated to comply with, I would say probably we would assess if we need to keep that funding source,
Right.
and then figure out ways to do that. I would imagine much like other folks in this room are doing, which is staying true to our shared values. And at this time, I'm not aware of anything coming that would have those sorts of implications, but we're definitely keeping, I'm sure, just like all of you, very close eye on everything and doing our best to stay that course.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, the admin report, EIG fiscal agent report.
Already, we're good.
Oh, we
Dr.
already did?
Dr.
Oh,
Turner.
good. Oh, got it. He's right. Discussion items. Let's move to Equity Access Subcommittee updates.
I think so.
Please.
Okay, so just a reminder of the areas of inquiry that the committee decided upon. The first one is who is actually accessing those early childhood services now? And how are we ensuring, as always, that the families who need it most are getting it first? Second is, given our ongoing agreement dating back 10 years, what does the longitudinal data suggest regarding the impact of early childhood investments, especially for historically underserved groups? And also, lastly, how might the partnership leverage community opportunities and the clarity of early learning targets to expand education beyond something? So, that's just a quick reminder of where we're going. And so we focused on, in terms of the update, the first area of inquiry. So, one of the things that we committed to doing was gathering data surrounding those access barriers as it relates to our kindergarten registration process. So I'm happy to give an update around that. And the next slide just shows we have corrected the typo in questionnaire, so it's okay. But facing kind of screen that parents and families receive when they're looking at or going through the kindergarten registration process. So there is a specific questions around barriers and challenges, and then that opens up what those barriers might be. So we have some drop downs around basic accessibility and scheduling and that kind of thing. And then there's also a section around those things they found valuable and what those assets are. So if you go to the next slide, this is the back end of what our team is looking at and will eventually analyze once we get all of our kindergartners or a large number of our families registered. So for example, this is just a sample family who said that they did have trouble securing childcare, and the reasons were programs were too expensive. They couldn't find programs that open slots, wait lists were too long, program hours didn't match needs. So we're looking at that data to kind of figure out where we need to intervene. And then on the next page, you'll see the second question around family and community strength. So there's a number of different prompts there. And so this family found both very valuable creative play, also gross motor play, and then somewhat valuable going to the library and those kinds of things. So we're also keeping a close eye on what assets we need to lean into and support, and then those that we need to maybe perhaps communicate around to make sure that families are aware that these exist as support. So we are just keeping an eye on the data. And on the next slide, the reason why we are very early on in this process is on the 19th of February, our kindergarten registration portal opened. So it's earlier and earlier so that families are able to prepare. We always like to plug our kindergarten registration process, so it's there. And then 39 is the number of students that we have currently approved. Well, we have probably over 70 who've already registered since the 19th, so over the last couple of days. And then 2, the number of good questions that we have hoping to get some answers to and to analyze some data. So that is our update.
So I'm so excited seeing those questions, and I know the folks who have been in those meetings, we really thought hard about how to make those answers actionable for ourselves. So it's really exciting, and thank you to D97 and the registrar team for making that happen, because changes in systems are not small things. And we're really excited to see what comes of that. So just to build from that, at our most recent committee meeting, we also had a chance to take a look at some of the preliminary data that NORC sent our way. And one of the things that we want to continue to do at subcommittee level is looking at that data, diving in across people's various perspectives and really understanding what we can see from it and what we'd like to learn more about. And so we brought some of that this evening just to show you all. As you all may recall, our contract with NORC shifted. Once data use agreements were in place, then the data transfers happened. They've been cleaning that up, making sure that everything looks good, and it does. So we have some cool stuff to share. And the first one we like to share is these were our kindergartners last year. So our 2023-2024 kindergartners, and this registration system that Dr. Lofton shared, families share their child's history with preschool. And so this is the constellation of all Oak Park D97 kindergartners and where they went to preschool or didn't, right? So At the bottom is green. We've been playing with our language around that. That used to be called high quality. But it's really based on specific markers of NAEYC, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or Accelerate, which is our quality rating system in the state, gold and silver ratings. There are lots of quality programs that don't have either of those accreditations, but we need something that is benchmarkable and clear to everyone, so that's, the green represents those types of accreditations. So about a third of kids who end up in D97's kindergarten are going to a high quality preschool as measured by that particular measurement. The next band up, that sort of rusty golden straw, I don't know, is kindergartners who attended other preschools in Oak Park or River Forest. That includes Montessori programs who often aren't part of that formal accreditation system. And wonderful small programs who don't have the administrative infrastructure to do accreditation processes and that kind of thing. So we're looking at a lot of kiddos who end up in D97 are in our Oak Park and River Forest preschools and early childhood programs, which is great because we're here to help support quality across those programs. The turquoise then is our children who attended preschool outside of Oak Park and River Forest. And that top band, the 7.2%, is parents who reported no preschool history prior to kindergarten. This is the whole constellation of kindergartners. And if we go to the next slide, that's where we see, this is the constellation of kindergartners who went on to qualify for free and reduced price lunch. And so what we see in the green band, we can click back and forth between these, but a slightly higher utilization of those accredited preschool programs, those high quality programs as defined by those markers, which is great. Getting to the question that Dr. Lofton raised about, are the families with greatest need also supported in accessing high quality programs? And so our children who qualified for free and reduced price lunch do over index in that green. But as you can see at the top, they also way over index in that section on having no reported preschool prior to kindergarten. So I think getting to what Dr. Lofton pulled up for us as one of that committee's areas of inquiry, right, is how can we also leverage community learning opportunities? We know that there are some families for whom formal preschool isn't something that they're interested in doing. And so how can we enrich environments where they are? We know that many families opt for friend, family, neighbor care instead of formally structured settings. Again, what can we do that enriches our community so that those are positive interactions and learning environments that help kids get ready for kindergarten? And then as we're learning from this emerging data, which is super exciting, understanding what other barriers may exist. So we wanted preschool, but we couldn't afford it. What does that direct us to do? We wanted preschool, but we couldn't find it. What does that direct us to do? So really sort of pairing some of this existing data with some of the new and emerging data that we're collecting, that will help us paint that picture. So we're pretty excited about that. Any questions about that or comments so far?
What are some of the data points that inform the increase in the percent of FRPL kindergartners with no preschool? What have you found there? Since we're beyond the pandemic being an excuse, I
think we both are and aren't, right? When you look at 1920, so that was the school year when COVID hit. 10% of those kids had no preschool. And I think that this is true nationally as well. The recovery has been slow and there are families who still haven't returned. And where that was hardest hit is families from lower income. And so that recovery piece is still there, I think. And then I think for us, this is part of why we added those questions to the registration process to better understand what some of those barriers and challenges are. So that if that's a number that could be reduced so that more kids are accessing preschool, then we're reducing it. And if it's not a number that could be reduced because there really is now a community that's that large that is saying my children will not go to a formally structured preschool because of family care, because of our cultural beliefs, because of any number of things, then it's on us to make those environments as enriching as possible and support families' goals for their children. So I'm curious, I keep saying how excited I am about this new data, but I really am excited about it to see how it can inform us there. In a parallel way, at the collaboration, we're also working on a family survey that I think you all have heard a little bit about, which will target families of kids birth to 5. We last did that in 2016, so obviously lots has shifted and changed across our community since then. But really looking with that survey at trusted sources of information, their hopes and visions for their children, how their community supports them in achieving those hopes. And so we'll definitely leverage this group to help us with getting that survey to as many people as possible so that we have that set of data, the kindergarten registration data, as well as all of our historical data, as well as then sort of national statistics and information that we look to for comparison about, is it anomalous to our community or is preschool recovery moving more slowly? So.
Is there any, just follow up, is there any, there was not a question on the current survey about, or was there a question on the current survey, asking parents about non-traditional working hours being a barrier to?
There is not that on the existing kindergarten registration system. It is listed in the new questions as, you know, meeting those hours as well as something we can explore in our family survey to better understand.
Yeah, I'm really curious if that.
Yeah, if that sort of gig work, absolutely, yeah.
Maybe a more basic question, so is I'm a big fan of school, right? But is there a sort of base assumption that getting all the kids into preschool is a goal? Right, because I'm just thinking like we did preschool because we needed childcare, right? Like, and if we hadn't needed childcare, I'm not sure we would have opted for it, or if we had, we might have opted for, if there'd been like a forest bathing kind of preschool, we would have gone for something like that, right? Rather than anything more traditionally educational, so, I don't know, so that's, yeah, maybe just a sort of base.
No, it's not at all a basic question. I think it's a really important one, right? Because some of the conversation about what defines high quality in early childhood is services and supports that meet the needs of each unique family, because that period from birth to 5 has such a wide range of developmental needs and experiences. So in my mind, if that 23.8% includes some folks who wanted to but couldn't access for whatever reason, then I would like that number low.
Sure.
If that number includes really folks who are opting not to do traditional preschool, then I would like to work with them to enrich those environments. I think it's interesting to better understand that. I think we probably all have some assumptions about what's going on there, right? Some of it is choice, some of it is access, some of it is knowledge. Some of it might be not understanding how enriching and wonderful preschool can be if that's a choice that you want to make. But I think to better understand it before we decide if it's something we want to make smaller or bigger.
And one other related question, so we currently, so Forest Park offers preschool starting at age 3 to public schools, right? And I know we don't offer that. Do we offer, I guess, do we offer transitional kindergarten currently, or is that something that we've talked, that there's been conversation? I know it's budget, but like I'm just curious where that is in the school conversation. Well, we don't.
Not yet, right?
Yeah.
No,
I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, so right now, we do have preschool starting at age 3, but no, transitional kindergarten, and Bill has been a conversation, but it's not.
And someone brought this up with me recently, and I had to look up what transitional kindergarten was, right? So it's this idea that children who are 4 but turn 5 between September 2nd and February 2nd. So it's my son's birthday is September 24th. I'm like, oh, if we'd offered that, maybe we would have sent him, maybe not. ADHD. Maybe it's just as well, but it would have been nice to have the option, right? So,
I think that's the fundamental thing is every family having the option. And we talked about, you know, if I had the option, I would have loved to, you know, the
Yeah.
force bathing, right? And so I think that, some families having the options to, know their child and know what they need for their children. And some families then knowing what they need for their children and not having access to the option, that's what we're trying to solve for. And I think, one question I have is around N sizes here, so I think that's important for us to always kind of keep in mind the scale that we're talking about. So I think that's always on our minds here. So that's one thing I would ask, you know, just going forward that we kind of, and I appreciate the disaggregation around free and reduced lunch and I think whatever other demographic indicators we have, we should just in our practice always be disaggregating across as many different factors, gender, race, and so on. So if that's available, which I believe it should be, that would be one thought. So N sizes and demographics. And the other thing I was thinking about is, you know, the focus and the going back to the equity questions that Emily outlined for the group, it's like, right now, is it accurate to say that our focus has been on enhancing the quality of green and orange or straw or rust? You know, our focus has been on increasing the quality and connecting in that space. And I see the equity questions to say, our focus needs to be on serving the students in the red and blue space. That's a very different proposition of what it is that we're doing with our time and resources. And what opening up kind of that portfolio of access that families with resources have to other families. So I'm just this is a very visual example of where our kind of focus is and where it needs to be for us to make an equity move. And until we do that, I think we need to know that the longitudinal data isn't going to shift in the way we envision. And that's, I think, a difficult conversation. And I think Jonathan also, like, as we come together to say, who are we? What are we trying to do? What does this need to look like? I think those are some really kind of courageous conversations we need to have.
Right. I really appreciate your insights on this. Oh,
Thank
I should know that. It's because I'm sitting in the seat.
It's changed everything.
I really appreciate the insights, and I think that regarding the, I really want to underscore the importance of the N for these, because it's really hard to know what to do with the data without it. So, for example, I assume, and I'm pretty sure that's right, the second set of bar graphs, the one we're looking at here, is a subset of the first, correct? So they're not distinct populations. As a result, we don't know post-pandemic if the raw number of kids who identify, well, what's happened to that raw number of kids? And so the shifts that we see in any one of the chunks could be due to just a completely shifting overall population of free and reduced kids, not necessarily a change in, what's happening in the community at large. So I think it would be really interesting to know that. So anyway, that's all. It would be really useful to see. How are you getting your free and reduced numbers? Is that what's reported to you after the kids register? In 97?
That's right, that data comes through the info snap.
So these are 97 numbers.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, okay, and so then we can go to the next slide. This is our kids, so our kindergarten data that kindergarten teachers collect from students. Looking at their readiness. Obviously, in many ways, those kids are kindergarten ready because they're in kindergarten when this data is collected, and so. But in terms of meeting some of those benchmarks. And again, this is year over year comparison. We can absolutely work with NORC to go in and add ins to all of this. But just what we're seeing in terms of improvement and whether that's improvement over time or when we think about some of that COVID recovery, seeing kids come in at some higher levels of meeting or exceeding developmental expectations, widely held expectations across all of these different domains. The first is LLD, which is language and literacy development, math, social emotional, and then all three of those domains in the final column. And then our final, this is just a little taste of some of the data that's coming that we're working with NORC and pulling together. Our final one is a different data set, which is Teaching Strategy Gold. This is collected at the preschool level. So this is collected at our 3 Preschool for All publicly funded preschool programs. And those are called checkpoints that they do with all of the enrolled students fall, winter, and spring to monitor children's growth across the school year. So again, these represent children who are meeting or exceeding WHE widely held expectations across all of those different domains. One of the fun things that we played around with as a committee was looking at an incredibly small data set. I think the N was 14 or something like that of kids who had both preschool Teaching Strategy Gold data and kids data across all of the domains, and looking to see if children who were flagged in kindergarten as not meeting some of those developmental expectations are also flagged in the preschool as not meeting those expectations, or if there was a disconnect. Super small data set, so it's more fun and interesting to play with than it is necessarily telling of anything, but really from a learning standpoint and a curiosity standpoint, it's really interesting to look at that and understand some of what might be going on. I think all of this is some of them what's happening at the committee level. What we will get you, and I think what we'll talk about as a group today as well, is we do and will still produce that big report that everyone gets every year, but we also know that it's a big report and want to make sure that what we're lifting up and talking about together are the data points that really make the most difference to all of us, that are the most actionable for all of us, and that really continue to move us as a community toward that continuum from early childhood into elementary school, into high school, into community, and what that looks like. So I'm excited to think about that with all of you, about just sort of what those data points are and might be, and how we can focus some of these conversations. I think if we can actually go back, probably one more, my straw color. And I think Dr. Shaw, you're exactly right that a lot of our work at the collaboration has focused on green and straw. So that's things like professional development for the teachers in those classrooms. That's things like mental health consultation for those programs so that they're getting that specialized support. And one of the initiatives that we're working on that we're excited about, you heard about at our last meeting, which is that basics community-wide model. And I think a lot of that gets to particularly the red, which is the children who are reporting no preschool history. Well, the children aren't reporting it, their families on their behalf are reporting it. I'd love to know what that form looked like. Kindergartners filled it out themselves. But really enriching those environments in partnership with communities and families. So that's another thing that we're really excited about. So I don't know, you can scoot that forward again, I guess, if there are questions or comments about any of those last things.
I'll note that I referenced growth minded in my college class today. So because we're doing critiques of stories and they're all very anxious about it. And so I was like, do you do social emotional learning in your elementary school? And like, let's talk about growth mindset. So anyway, I just thought it would be needs.
It's still good for you, no matter how grown you are. And if we back up one more, I do, in early childhood, social emotional is so foundational. It really is foundational for a lot of our future learning. So it's exciting that our kids come in with that being the domain where they're most meeting milestones. I think that's exciting and an interesting thing to think about. So.
So you guys don't do any accreditation for preschools, you don't do any, you don't put out a list, right? And like say, here, we've started these as the accredited preschools. You don't do anything like that.
We do keep an early childhood directory and we do indicate if they have gold or NAEYC accreditation or that kind of thing. We don't have our own star rating system.
I think that,
Sometimes
so
I get it.
I'm the director, I'm sorry, I'm like trying to remember from when I was on the library board and like you did a presentation there, right? So I remember seeing the directory now. What I see on social media is often people are looking for preschool recommendations and it's very ad hoc. And, you know, if I happen to see it, I might point them to the early childhood collaboration, but I often don't, and I wonder if there's an opportunity to have a digital version of your directory that is periodically pushed out to the local, I hate to say, the local mom groups, right? And working moms and the various other ones around, it's like quarterly, it just gets sent out or something. So
Yeah, on a regular cadence, it's
Yeah.
a great, we have a group we're working with, they're our partnership board.
Yeah.
Some might call it young professionals board, but young aren't we all? So our partnership board, and one of their big things is supporting that sort of social media presence. We do have the directory digitally, but it also is a constantly changing audience, right? Someone who has family friend or neighbor here who suddenly needs a change to that. Someone who didn't think they cared about childcare who suddenly has a baby. So I think that's a great point. It's still limited, right? If you can back up one more slide, the straw colored, what color would you call that? Mustard? No.
it's different on our screen there anyways.
Like orange?
Orange.
American? Okay, I like that, whatever that color is, whatever milestones I am not meeting as a result of not knowing this, whatever color that is, I think about it a lot, because there are many things happening there that are very green, right? That are very high quality, that are wonderful. Oftentimes when you see those Oak Park mom groups, you see recommendations for preschools that I know are not green preschools, that I know are beloved and doing great work. So there are real limitations to this that we're challenged by too, yeah.
And I guess I wonder, in addition to the actual preschools, right, as you are doing supplemental options or tracking what's available, like, you know, listing like the library story times, things like that would also be a great thing to push out to communities.
Thank you. And we do keep a family calendar. I can send you all the link, but it is updated monthly with free events throughout the community, everything from story time at Brown Cow.
Right.
Buy your own ice cream, oh no, terrible. To library and there's incredibly cool things.
And I think one of the things that your question makes me think about is the portrait of an Oak Park eighth grade graduate, and we're mapping that all the way backwards to like the portrait of a rising kindergartner. And so one of the things that might become an opportunity for us is to begin to organize all of these opportunities into that framework so that it becomes a way to communicate like, oh, there's the story time at the Brown Cow. That's actually here in our dimension powered by literacy. And so we can begin to use those dimensions and those logos to communicate to parents like, hey, let's make sure we're hitting all of these different dimensions.
Right, exactly, right, because you don't know what you don't know as a parent, right? So, and if I'm just thinking like when we were condo hunting long before we had kids, the number of condos we saw that had no books in them, right? It was just like people had been living there, but they had no books, right? And so like just as a sort of like default would say like, these are things that we think are, will help prepare your child for kindergarten.
And that also makes then the community the space, and we start to leverage all those opportunities that are there. But right now, only maybe a subset of parents knows A, how to find them, and B, can get there or whatever, but it becomes then you can also then think about, okay, now what are the access points to that, and it gets us moving. And I think, that's an exciting conversation for us to have, as a community.
so I appreciate it.
Did we collect any data on the any organizations that offer preschool that book several years, fill up their roster several years in advance as a barrier to as an equitable access barrier? Because I know that at least anecdotally, when we moved here, it was in December 2019, and we wouldn't have had any chance of like finding preschool care person had it not been for just things aligning very favorably with people leaving all these, taking jobs. It just was very fortunate, and unusually so, I would assume. And so is that something that in a community like Oak Park factors in a meaningful way?
I will say it is a very hard thing to get our arms around because of the nature of childcare and preschool programs. So, folks can do childcare 2 days a week, folks can do 3 days a week. So maybe, I have space in this program for a child who's 14 months who can come Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it's really hard for us to get our arms around the complexities of, it's not one-to-one matching, basically. We do on a monthly basis try to keep up with programs about what are your waitlists looking like, what's your enrollment looking like, so that when families call us or are reaching out to our online, our coordinated intake for access, we can say, with absolutely no recommendation of any of the following, we know these 5 programs have slots available and are a good place to start with your phone calls. Recognizing that for a family, calling the 50-some programs in the area would be really overwhelming. So we try where we can to at least reduce that as a barrier. And, not unique to us, care for infants, incredibly difficult to find, incredibly tender for families to also feel the level of trust to leave little ones who aren't yet verbal. So.
Does your directory indicate which preschools offer financial, like my son went to the day nursery, so sliding scale there, right? So that's it. And this is only Oak Park, right? Not River Forest.
We do have River Forest in our this is D97, so the data is D97,
The data-
only Oak Park,
Only Oak.
correct.
We don't have anything really for our River Forest students then, right? There's
In this data here,
no, but do we have access to anything elsewhere? Like there's nobody else. There's no one. I mean, River Forest has like half-day kindergarten still. Do
they shifted as of last year,
They knew they
it was
were
their first year.
They just, so they finally got that done.
Yeah.
But we don't have, but there isn't an organization like this.
That's correct.
You should expand your scope.
I'm open to that conversation for sure. Absolutely. Cool.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to governance, which I'm super excited. Those of you who were at the last meeting might recall that this was brought up largely because I think there's this conversation is predicated on shared insights among us that are the nature of the context that we're in right now is different than when the contract was initially authored several years ago. We're not actors that need to be convinced of the value of early childhood education. We're all invested actors in this, and it seems to really merit looking at the language of the contract and how we can change that, how we can really brainstorm how we can create a more robust advocacy coalition around early childhood in our community, and assign more meaningful operational tasks to our respective groups that we can report back on. And I think that this was relevant then, but I think it's all the more relevant in our current environment, and really focusing on how we can build our on local services. This is a real strength. Strength. So there's a great opportunity to improve there. So that's the background on this. So it begins with looking at the contract, and I wanted to, I was talking with Mary at the beginning of the meeting. I think that there's merit to assigning, to creating a new working group around this, perhaps just one individual from our respective areas. And maybe we can decide that tonight, if we can. But I think that having a working group to really dedicate some thought and energy to this makes a lot of sense. So that's a background on the governance discussion. The areas that we sort of highlighted here are that we really want to discuss more are communications. Are there certain topics or issues that we need to be updated on more consistently? Should we revisit how we share information throughout the year? Meeting cadence, just the current meeting cycle for both the tri-board and the IGA reps, the communication needs of these groups, and looking at the nature of subcommittees. I know Dr. Shaw, you brought up a question about the equity subcommittee in some ways being, well, isn't that already what we're here for? And are we in creating a dedicating time to a subcommittee, should we rethink that? And then IGA reserve account. Let's see. It's not clear whether the IGA can without. Laura did a great job of putting together. We had a big discussion on this, and she provided notes, which is great. So thank you. But it seems like it's not clear whether the IGA can withhold approving the purpose that the collaboration looks forward when it's directly related to the IGA services. So we should revisit that as well. Definitely look into meeting logistics as well. We have occasionally had trouble ensuring quorum at some of the meetings, and it'd be great to figure out what the barriers are to that. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I want to just open up the discussion around this, see how if everyone feels like we're on the same page with this, or if there's anything additional that you'd like to pitch to this.
So I didn't take notes on the whole list. So you're proposing a working group to
Yes, one thing I left out that's really important. We've also discussed whether or not we can have a shared framework, an index of variables that we can, monitor and perhaps even assign some to individual domains. So we at the last meeting, remind me again, Mary, what was the framework that was shared that you did a presentation on? We had a guest.
Oh, the basics.
The basics. Something like the basics that we could that could really anchor us in evidence-based practice and look at how our different domains can sort of address different areas in that framework. Might be a useful thing to consider as well. Yeah.
And I think a question I will just throw in, and clearly you and D97 work together very closely, right? D200 we're a little further off, right? So I guess I'm wondering, aside from chipping in cash, what would be helpful for you to get from D200 in terms of, you're right now looking at kindergarten ready, right? But eventually you want them to be high school ready, right? So that path, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
we can be helpful.
no, I mean, and I think that's one of the things about the original agreement and original data sharing agreements. We're looking at D97 data, and we are at a point where we've been around long enough that the first cohort where we have a full data set is in 8th grade now. So we'll be working with D200 on data sharing, but also understanding what some of those data points might be, what some of those areas of inquiry might be from early childhood with this really, it's incredibly robust and thoughtful and rich data that we get about kindergartners. And our team at NORC can follow those children, so can tell us lots of interesting things about them. As they grow up and now as they hit D200, so that's definitely an exciting thing. And what else can D200 do? Keep turning out such lovely students, they volunteer with us. I'm obsessed with them, they're so lovely. You know, encourage workforce participation in the early childhood field. There's, you know, I think there's lots of cool opportunities that we're open to, but those are, for sure.
So, Greg, so as this cohort is coming through, you'll be working with Dr. Shaw on like aligning so that we're. You know what I mean? Like, you know what data they're doing and will be.
We haven't gotten that specific, and although this takes me back, the very first day I met you, right? When we had this conversation about long-term tracking of the effects of this, so.
Not to dump more work in your plate.
Oh, not at all, this is an important question, and I love this as a focus for this group, you know. What is, and it's not just data protocols, I think for this meeting, when we do come together, what do we want to look at and how do we want to look at it? But I think it's also kind of a long-term data roadmap for the childhood collaboration for that encompasses, you know, the needs of all of our entities. We are really at this nice milestone, as you mentioned, right? We are at a point where there's going to be real outcome data that's for the whole shebang. So let's use this as an opportunity to figure out what we want this whole thing to look at. I think that's really important. And then within that too, it's baked in what you said, just the ideas that I latched onto when you were sharing them, Jonathan, is also throughout a school, you talked about the cadence of these meetings. How often do we meet, and do we want to do something? We don't want to be really prescriptive here, but perhaps we do want to have something like, you know, these are 4 topics we want to make sure are covered throughout a specific school year. So we always kind of keep this rhythm in place. I think that's needed in my now 4 years, you know, in this. And so a subcommittee doing that, so we're not doing all around this horn. I'll applaud that as well. I think that's fabulous. So yeah, this is a moment that I'm hoping we can take a good advantage of.
So I'm just gonna second that. I think this is literally, you know, we've been doing this for a long time and we've just been rolling the contract over, which is fine because we all do support this. But now is a really good time to take stock. I'm gonna give a quick shout out to Gavin Carney, who actually passed that data sharing law that allows us to do this whole all the way through D97 to D200. But I think getting a subcommittee looking thoughtfully, coming up with a cadence to what are we looking at, what are our main goals, and doing presentations along those lines would be fabulous.
I nominate you.
I'm definitely.
There you go.
So
I second that.
I think the village level, I mean, it's about who is the right person to represent. And, you know, then utilizing the resources that exist at the village for, you know, this vision of early childhood awareness everywhere, every place. And, you know, so our Board of Health is the first thing that comes to my mind. So to work with Kevin, you know, we currently have elected officials sitting at the board table who are invested in this. And as you said earlier, we're no longer having that fight about like, is this where we should be, you know, investing our dollars, because we all agree, which is an amazing thing and creates good energy. And actually, I think is part of what invited this conversation in. Like, we don't want to just come to meetings where we're getting the update. We want to, you know, we run for office and we represent in our community, no matter whether it's a D97, D200, or at the village, with passion. The folks who are at the village level, that passion can vary. But but we have the steady resources at the village, with
the people that would take the vision and run with that then become a partner to you and not just a check. So I think it's about identifying the right representative. And, between Lucia and myself, we both would raise our hands, but, is there also somebody else that should be part of that amongst that?
Well, I mean, we could have any number of inputs, and so the coordination, this coordination is super important because we can look at this from a public health standpoint, we can look at this from a economic development, workforce development standpoint. We are interested in Cradle's career and workforce development. We're interested in youth development, so we can look at it from an equity standpoint. These are things that we're actively kind of planning around from a strategic standpoint. And so I think, I don't think it would be a problem for us to identify the appropriate person. But as we look at all these different inputs, I mean, who forms this working group, I mean, it could inevitably be me or someone right next to me in the manager's office that can actually push into this.
So it's a yes.
Yeah.
It's a yes.
I think this is exciting. I think this is a right time to do it. I think for me, yes, 3 years into this, but I'm coming in with something, obviously the framework that already exists and automatically supported, but still new enough to where, and then I've been here long enough to where I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for us as a village to help re-envision or, strengthen, the work that we're doing together. Yes.
So we need for the contract or for a framework to determine that, it's about creating that purpose statement, right? And moving from there. Does anyone want to volunteer for that? Jonathan?
Yeah, and I think just, it sounds like, we have agreement that, we can get one representative from each domain. So yeah, I'm happy to, write that purpose statement. And then we can.
I think I just want to speak for the whole committee that we're all happy to have you.
Well, and I do just want to emphasize the fact that these are the right legs of the stool still. D200, D97 the village. I think everybody is, still in it on this piece of it. So it's really exciting to see what the project is.
Yeah, can I ask, the library does contribute funds, right? Okay, but they're not one of the.
That's right.
People who have to sign off.
That's right. So both the library and the park district contribute funds to us, but they're not a party to that intergovernmental. So they're contributing at a much smaller level.
And does the township contribute? Are they involved at all? Do they do early childhood stuff at all?
The township does not do early childhood stuff, but breaking news, we are receiving a grant from the Community Mental Health Board. So that will be township funding. So we, I think in a lot of our organizational lore, there's this all 6 of Oak Park's taxing bodies contributing, and the township had been one that had sort of fallen off that cycle. So we're back, we will be back. So that's pretty exciting for us too.
And yeah, just heard me that the village just lost funds for a youth internship program, right? Which I'm very excited to see. Maybe the collaboration could use some interns anyway. So
Appreciate you making the connection.
You work with St. Giles, or say Catholic St. Lucy's?
We do. Yeah, with their early childhood program. We sure do. They're a screening partner. They were at symposium, so.
I did talk to the president recently, the brand new one, and he is feeling under resourced as far as support, so social emotional support for him.
and I was just in the directory for things like religious affiliations. Is that that must be indicated or not? Like if someone's looking for a Catholic preschool or a Jewish preschool. Is that No, there is, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture the.
So I think it would behoove us to at least discuss a rough timeline so that this doesn't, so it doesn't get into the summertime and haven't assigned a working group yet. So I think that ideally, it'd be great to figure out who the representative is in each of our respective areas and get something on the calendar in April. Does that sound doable?
Calendar for the working group.
The working group, yes, yeah. That sound fair?
Maybe you want to compare calendars right now, or do you want to do that after the meeting?
Oh, we,
The three of you.
yeah, I think we'll just
Yeah.
wait until we figure out who's
Yeah.
assigned. But I think just as a,
Yeah, April.
Yeah.
And then this larger group would meet again, well, you don't know, you're gonna figure that out.
yeah,
You'll figure that out. I rotate off the board at the end of April, so you won't be seeing me again for at least 2 years. So I'm gonna take a break.
You're always welcome at meetings, though.
Bye, yeah.
And we can, at the celebration, just support with things like doodle polls and scheduling and wrangling, absolutely. And then just, according to our contract and the IGA itself, the next time this group, in terms of the IGA reps, would convene would be fall of this year. So working groups and subcommittees obviously have space, but the way that the contract is laid out is that that's typically, and that the host rotates annually. So this is the last D200 meeting, and then rotate over to the village next.
So, sorry, just remember, the USC offers a master's in early childhood education, so that's what I teach, so if, in English, not early childhood, but if you need a contact with that program to find graduates who might be interested in working with you, et cetera. Please feel free to contact me. So I feel like they should bring a class here to this meeting and listen, right? So. All right.
we're early. Well, if no one else has any other comments or questions, I'm going to move to adjourn at 7:20 PM. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.